This week on the legal side, we're talking about two very large lawsuits that were won by private security businesses. Every day, just about, every week, and hundreds of times a year, lawsuits are filed against not only individual law enforcement officers and police departments, but nationwide, they are filed against private security contractors, electronic security companies, and individual employees. And that's what this edition is all about. It's not just the cops being sued. Private security, for many years, have been subject to lawsuits. And we're going to go over some of the top types of lawsuits involving private security. Welcome to this edition of On the Legal Side, a production of Blue Ram Media Group, LLC, and Private Officer International. I'm your host, Rick McCann, and today we're discussing two recent judgments against security companies. And what's very unusual is that every once in a while, we'll see security companies suing other security companies, both contract security as well as electronic security. And this past week, a very large case was decided by a jury in favor of one of those private security companies. So let's start with the electronic security company located in Charlotte, North Carolina. CPI is a regional mid-sized company that's quite well known and operates an access control camera electronic security business. And they've been around, like I said, for a number of years. What's very unique is that oftentimes in the electronic field, as well as in the contract security field, you will find conflicts between companies who often say that either their proprietary methods or information or something else about that company was stolen, or that fraudulent activities were conducted against one business or the other. And I have seen, having been in the electronic security business, I have seen false advertisement saying that our system is much better than XYZ system. Our cameras are almost like humans, unlike the XYZ company. We'll do this, this, and this. No other company can do it. And oftentimes, companies will use other phrases as a dig against their competitor, and they'll also even use proprietary information, either because their current employer or manager or even company owner once worked for that other company, and they've taken that information out to start their own business. So some of that could be considered protected, copyrighted. Some of it could be called work product. We'll get into that today as well. And some of it could be outright theft. And in this situation, the jury awarded CPI Security in Charlotte, North Carolina, $149 million. In a significant turn of events, CPI Security officially won that lawsuit against Vivint Smart Home. $189 million was finally decided by the jury in damages. The verdict was delivered unanimously. Again, that's, doesn't always happen, by an 8-person jury in the U.S. District Court, Western District of North Carolina, Charlotte Division, finding that Vivint Smart Home Security was responsible for using deceptive door-to-door sales practices to mislead and confuse CPI customers so that Vivint could take over their alarm systems. And so what this company was accused of, and this is not the first time, by the way, that they have been accused of such fraudulent means and methods, is that they would go door-to-door. Their sales reps, mostly for residential, but they also do commercial, they would knock on doors and say that they represented CPI Security and that they were running a special. They were going to upgrade the customer's security system, add some additional equipment at no cost whatsoever. Of course, it's free. No cost whatsoever. And what happened? Not everyone, but many people took advantage of upgrading their security system, adding either cameras or motion sensors or more contacts. And then what these representatives of the competitor, Vivint, did was they then went and reprogrammed the dialer of that customer's phone to send the signal of any activations not to CPI's monitoring station, but instead to their station, to their monitoring station. The whole point of this gimmick, which is often used, it's not just this company, many companies over the years have been accused of it, including ADT and others. What they do is they just want the monitoring fee. They just want that monthly residual income. If they can get away with this 1,000 times and the monitoring fee is $49.95 a month, then they're making $50,000, more than $500,000 just on this little scheme in one area. This goes back, this scheme and scam goes back quite a ways. It's been used as far back as I can remember, and I've been involved in the security field for many years, but I see this, and as a regulatory instructor for the electronic security business, we talk about this. We talk about the various scams in the electronic security business that is out there, and, this is one of them, obviously, but there are other scams as well. In this lawsuit that went on for a while, the court jury found that Vivint used false or misleading information to acquire existing CPI security customers and lock them into high-priced multi-year finance as well as a monitoring contract that went on for 3 to 5 years. Vivint deceived CPI's customers by making some of the following false claims, according to the lawsuit and the jury verdict. Vivint representatives presented themselves as being affiliated with CPI. Vivint is purchasing or has purchased CPI. They told customers, we own CPI now. We have purchased it. We're going to be the company now that holds your account. Vivint is taking over CPI customer accounts. That's what they told some of the CPI customers. We're going to be taking these over, and that's why we're out here redoing the system for you. Vivint manufactures CPI's equipment, and it's at their request that we're going to customers' homes to upgrade the CPI system. That was a statement used numerous times. We're here to upgrade you because we manufacture the equipment they use. A total lie, of course. Vivint was sent or is acting on behalf of CPI. We're here to help you to upgrade your system to make it better. We do this annually. We do this semi-annually. And after signing contracts under these false pretenses of Vivint scams, customers would later come to realize that Vivient's claims were untrue. However, Vivient made it very difficult for customers to cancel their contracts. They often, if not always, have drafts set up on people's credit cards or checking accounts, so they automatically are drafted every month. And it leads many CPI customers to be frustrated, not only with Vivint, but also with CPI, that they allowed this to happen. CPI being a security company, how could they allow someone to come behind their back, knock on doors, and pretend to be representatives of the CPI company? Some eventually did cancel their accounts with CPI. Of course, it's at no fault of the CPI security company, but this happens. Despite CPI having no affiliation with Vivint or the schemes they use to deceive CPI's customers, CPI lost a large amount of revenue. They lost a large amount of customers. The evidence that CPI presented during this lawsuit, by the way, against their competitor Vivint, demonstrated widespread, egregious practices that this company, Vivint, affects across the country. Not only with CPI, but other alarm companies and customers. For example, a corporate training video encouraged sales reps to press themselves into customers' homes. In other words, force their way through the door. Now, in the last 3 or 4 years, we have examples of other companies throughout the country doing the same thing. They're also trained to intentionally not allow the customer to refuse entry. No, we've got to come in. We're with CPI, or we're with ADT, or we're with XYZ. We've got to take care of this problem, this upgrade today. A stage of the lawsuit came as numerous witnesses were presented by CPI Security explaining their dealings with Vivint. And in one instance, in fact, a CPI customer stated that one of the Vivint sales reps threatened, knocked on the customer's door saying that he was one of the guys that installed the CPI system originally, and he was there to just do a little maintenance on the system. All of these were untruths. All of these were fraudulent. All of these were illegal. And yet, they got away with it for a while. And then, they didn't. When we come back from this first break, we'll pick it up where I just left off, explaining what the judge and the jury heard and why this should be concerning to you as a consumer, but also as a security professional. Don't think that contract security companies, uniform security companies, don't do the same thing, because they do. We'll be right back here on The Legal Side, a production of Blue Ram Media Group, LLC, and Private Officer International. I'm your host, Rick McCann.
Are you looking for the finest private security officer training in the Charlotte metropolitan area? Do you need PPS qualifications in armed or unarmed training? Or maybe you're over there across the line in South Carolina and you need the SLED training. Well, we've got the right training at the right time for you. Premier Training Academy, located at 5624 Executive Center Drive, Suite 142 in metropolitan Charlotte, North Carolina. Give them a call today, 704-806-4933. They also offer firearms training, personal protection, first aid and CPR, and so much more. Call John at 704-806-4933.
Each day, those that protect and service in law enforcement put their lives on the line. These law enforcement officers often work long and irregular hours in tough and dangerous conditions, run a high risk of being attacked, wounded, or even killed by the very criminals that prey on us. Every year, hundreds of law enforcement officers are killed or seriously injured in the line of duty. Blue Alert is a system that provides the means to speed the apprehension of violent criminals who kill or seriously injure local, state, or federal law enforcement officers. Find out how you can truly help those who help. That's bluealert.us.
Welcome back today to On the Legal Side. I'm your host, Rick McCann. This is a production of Blue Ram Media Group, LLC, and Private Officer International. Now, before I do move on to the rest of this story of the two lawsuits that were just adjudicated during the past week, I want to go over a couple of words that are often thrown around in the legal system and sometimes misunderstood. And one of those is called work product. And work product is anything that an employee produces during their work hours as part of their regular job. So, for instance, if you are working at a furniture factory and you design a beautiful stand or dresser or some other product within the description of your job, then you don't own that. The company owns that design, and they can continue to go ahead and manufacture that long after you're gone. Work product often comes up in the music business. Many singers and songwriters get their start in Nashville as songwriters. What companies will do is record labels will hire songwriters to come in and sit into a studio, a small closet-like room for hours and hours at a time to drum up songs. And some of those songs are hits and many are misses. But during the course of those 40 hours or 20 hours, whatever it might be, if that individual songwriter does come up with a song that eventually does get recorded, might even go on to become a big, huge hit, that songwriter doesn't get credit. They aren't paid royalty because this was work product. They were being paid an hourly rate or a salary for the week or some type of other amount of money to just sit there and crank out these songs. So work product is anything that's produced by an employee or a person being paid a lump sum of money to do this work. They have no rights to that property, to that design, to that song. Even if they write a book on consignment where they've been paid to do that, they don't own any other rights. Another word that is often thrown out in the legal system is IP, or copyright. A copyright is a type of intellectual property that gives its owner the exclusive right to copy, distribute, adapt, display, and perform a creative work, usually for a limited time. So if I have three of my partners sit down with me and write a training book as part of their job with the company, and then we go on to print these, they don't own the copyright or the IP. I do, or my business does. The copyright usually, once it's filed with the federal government, has an expiration date, and it can be renewed by the originator. But if they fail to do that, then someone else could come along and change a few words of that product and, again, relicense it as a copyright. And they would, the originator would not have any recourse whatsoever. The other word that's thrown out quite often in the legal realms and even within the contract security world is proprietary. When we think of proprietary, we're thinking about the in-house security officer who works for one specific company and not a contract guard company or security company where they supply many security officers to many places. But proprietary in the legal realm means that it is specific to one company or individual or the other. For instance, if I came up with a special blend of coffee, mixing coffee beans from all parts of the world, putting in 6 different parts, 6 different bean types, that would be a specific blend. That would be proprietary. If an employee working for me in my coffee production or coffee manufacturing company decides to go out on their own and they take that proprietary information to start up an exact replica of what I have going on in my coffee company, then that would be considered a proprietary breach and a theft. It could be civil. It could also be criminal if we right out stole that recipe, because that would be a product, a piece of property that belongs to me, to my company. A proprietary anything, whether that be information or a proprietary method of manufacturing something. Anyone who takes that can be charged or sued. So we do see work product, copyright, and proprietary lawsuits happening in the private security field, especially in the electronic world, where sometimes a company has come up with a specific way to wire an alarm system, or uses certain types of products that they manufacture in-house, and then an employee leaves and they go out and replicate that. As far as lawsuits in the private security industry, they continue to increase every year. But I want to break down very quickly the top 6 types of lawsuits that are filed by private security officers against their employers, as well as vendors, clients, and others that file lawsuits against the contract security company. So let's start with the employee. Hundreds and thousands of discrimination lawsuits are filed every year against companies, including private security. They allege age discrimination, race discrimination. Sometimes they are difficult to prove, but other times, with the right evidence and witnesses, they are easily won. Another type of lawsuit that contract security companies face from either current or former employees happens to be not paying wages or not paying overtime. Right now we have at least 7 security companies that are going through that lawsuit process right now that we're following for not paying overtime. Usually the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is a state agency, will come in and assist that employee to recover owed wages. But there are times when even the means of the EEOC and the state behind that doesn't work. So they authorize a civil lawsuit against that security company. And what we have seen, especially in the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years, is that many security companies will schedule an employee 7 days consecutively, but they will break those 7 days up over 2 weeks. So, for instance, they may work Thursday, Friday, and Saturday in week 1, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday in week 2. While that sounds like it's more than 40 hours, because it was scheduled over a 2-week period in many states, that's not overtime. You worked 24 hours this week and 24 hours the next week. Therefore, no overtime wages are owed. Security companies are often sued for excessive use of force by their security personnel. We're seeing this more and more, especially with the increased number of security officers that carry firearms. And we're also seeing a number of death-related lawsuits called wrongful death claims, where family members, even those that may not have been very close to the person who died, will file wrongful death claims against law enforcement as well as private security. And every year, unfortunately, private security officers are involved in dozens and dozens and dozens of fatal shootings, and therefore those wrongful deaths continue to rise. Another type of lawsuit filed against private security contract companies are breach of contract. That's usually between the security company and the client, but those have increased in recent years as well. Discrimination, breach of contract, not paying wages, use of force, civil rights, and wrongful death claims are the top lawsuits filed against private security companies. Will that decrease? Will that increase? It will definitely increase, as we all know and we talk about frequently, that the use of private security continues to rise. And, of course, with that, will continue lawsuits. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to follow up on those lawsuits and see what happened. You're listening to On the Legal Side, a production of Blue Ram Media Group, LLC.
As the trial continued on, of course, the company being sued, Vivian, continued to deny all activity. Oh, these were rogue former employees. Well, if that was true, if that was the case, how would those rogue former employees benefit by doing this? They would not get paid a commission. They were not being paid an hourly rate. How would they benefit? So that was bogus and proven to be false. A number of witnesses came forward, including law enforcement. A representative tried to get into a customer's home 3 times, according to testimony. The customer stated he was concerned about his family's safety because the man continued to try to push his way through. He eventually had his daughter call the police, grabbing a softball bat for protection and making the Vivian representative sit in his yard on the ground until police arrived. Another customer testified a similar situation. He had to go get a gun and threaten the representative because he tried to enter his home illegally. And story after story after story came out about this company. And eventually it was a no-brainer decision by the jury. They found that all of these testimonies by witnesses, by law enforcement, all of the accusations by CPI security was so egregious. The fraud, the deceit, the force, putting families in fear when they themselves are supposed to be representatives of security companies. So they awarded CPI. It was, I don't think it was a shock. It might have been a shock to the owners. $189 million. You say, well, that's electronic security, and you know what? Contract security, uniform security never happens there. Well, yes, it does. Just recently, out of New Jersey, and I'm very familiar, actually, with the subject involved, a person began, after leaving a security guard company, began sending letters to the clients and customers where he either worked for the security company or was familiar that they were customers of this company. And he represented to these customers that he just bought the security company. And he was the new owner. He was the president. And that he would be taking over, he and his staff would be taking over these contracts. And they actually began several contracts. And the way they did it was they adjusted the hours so that the original security company wasn't on site. I don't really know how they thought they were going to get away with this plan. Eventually, the other security company was going to come on duty, and there'd be a problem. 2 security companies, only one is contracted. Some accusations was made by this individual about the terrible services that this prior employer is well known to provide, terrible services, and that they were ghosting some accounts, not really supplying a security officer on duty, but they were billing for those hours, which that part may have been true. I don't know. Many companies, or some companies, I don't want to say many, some companies do ghost bill, and I have found them. I have seen them. And, sometimes it's, one time's a mistake. Okay, I thought that Bill was on duty last night. I guess he wasn't. I won't bill you. But if you continue billing for security personnel not there, which is called ghost billing, then that's a crime. And recently a number of police officers and several agencies have been arrested for that, and we've been reporting on that. But getting back to the contract security deal, so that security officer that quit and supposedly started his own business and was taking over this other company, he was eventually arrested. I don't know what happened. We haven't seen any further information on that case, but we are following it, and we'll update it in our daily news blog, which, by the way, is privateofficerbreakingnews.blogspot.com. And if you see news happening anytime, you can contact helpdesk at privateofficer.com 24/7. This is not the first time that we have had contract security companies fraudulently obtain business from competitors or falsify documents to make it look like that they work for. And I'll give you an example. This was a number of years ago. A security officer began billing. He worked a construction site, and he was the only one there. He worked 7 days a week, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. That was the standard hours. I think that's like 84 hours a week. He began billing the construction company, the client, and had the checks directly mailed to his post office box. Strange, huh? Except he invoiced the construction company with an invoice that had the name of his employer. I know, right? Weird. But this guy was smooth because he also had the construction company put his name on the checks. And he was able to cash them for a while, and eventually he got caught. When we're dealing with private security, whether it be electronic or contract, uniform, subcontracting, this happens a lot with subcontractors. ABC Security Company subcontracts out their service to XYZ Security Company in another state because they're not licensed to do business in that state, but the second company is. And what happens? That second company turns that account sometimes into their own account, and they begin collecting the money on site, and they begin to taking over like they were the original contract security agency and shutting the original security company out of the deal completely, and not, the first security company not getting paid and having some contractual fraud and deceit, and it all becomes civil until it doesn't, because in some cases, fraud that's involving contracts can become a felony. So And that's one of the benefits of being part of a regulatory agency, is that when you have contract fraud, those regulatory agencies will step in and get involved. Also, this past week, a contract security company lost a lawsuit that had been going on for quite some time. We've been reading about it for about 3 years. And a lawsuit was filed, and then it got dismissed, and then it was refiled by a former employee. Well, this past week, the employee showed that he was exposed to a lot of hazardous chemicals that violated OSHA and other federal regulations, including EPA, that he worked in a manufacturing plant without any PPE, no mask, no respirators. He had to make foot patrols hourly through the manufacturing plants. Now, other employees that were exposed to hazardous materials did wear respirators. They had all the PPE and et cetera, et cetera. He requested additional PPE for 9 months that he was there, and eventually he got sick. But the employer, who is now defunct, called Primary Security, they eventually went defunct. They went bankrupt, or they closed up, whatever they did. But the lawsuit was refiled, and the judgment was just placed against the two partners because they have since started another company. And so the undisclosed amount, which was, I'm sure, pretty substantial, eventually will be collected. The bottom line is that private security, unfortunately, is sued, both the individual and the contract security company owner. We can talk about the dozens and dozens of lawsuits that are filed weekly, monthly, yearly regarding excessive use of force against individuals by security officers. I don't know. I don't have the figure in front of me. I don't know the exact numbers at this moment, but I can tell you that it happens all the time. And, some security companies have said blatantly, that's why we have insurance. They'll pay it out. We'll just do a settlement. And that's what police departments in towns and cities do all the time as well. That's why we have insurance. Let's just do a quick settlement. Let's get it over with. Let's not go to trial because that's a very expensive process. They're asking for $1 million. Let's settle for, $200,000. No, they want $250,000. All right, we'll give them $250,000. Let's be done with this and let's move on. Both law enforcement and contract security do it all the time. When you're paying an attorney $300 to $500 an hour, and they're billing you per hour, they're billing you for their paralegals, they're billing you for all this other time that they're putting into the case, supposedly, it gets very expensive. And so many times, police, cities, and security companies would rather just settle. Well, we're going to settle. We could probably take a hit for $5 million on this case. Let's just settle for $1 million. It's going to be cheaper. The insurance company will pay. Our premiums will probably go up, but that's okay. That's why we have insurance. And they move on. Business as usual. And it's terrible because you know who gets left behind? The security officer. The person involved in that whole scenario, that whole situation, trying to do a good job, trying to do the right thing, trying to obey the rules, the laws. And maybe he did use too much force, but probably because it's a lack of training and experience. Every day we see security officers injured. Every day. Dozens injured on the job. Every year. 100 plus murdered on the job. More than law enforcement. Yes, we need to make sure that all of our dealings are legal, legit, above board when we're doing contract work, when we enter into agreements. We need to make sure that we treat our employees fairly, that we don't discriminate against them, that we don't violate OSHA or any other law, that we take care of our employees. And we need to make sure that we're not deceptive or fraudulent in our actions between a customer or an employee. that's going to do it for this edition of On the Legal Side. Stay tuned tomorrow for our Private Officer Beat Radio, and we've got an upcoming program later this week as well. Remember, if you want to hear something specific, if you want to be part of the radio show, if you have something to say, you can contact helpdesk@privateofficer.com. We're going to open up the microphone. We're going to open up the phone lines in a couple of weeks so everyone can have a chance to call in and just talk about whatever they want to talk about. Brand new show called Sounding Board for Security. We'll be telling you more about that in a newsletter this coming week. Until the next time, y'all be safe, be blessed, and we'll see you back here on the radio.